Audio check. 1 2 1 2. Audio check. Audio check. 1 2 1 2. Good morning, everyone. I am the last Omnitech, your favorite robot American, and welcome to another session of OMNI Draws, where you and I draw cool stuff. Now, I hope you're all doing well today, because I am doing A-okay. It has been a little crazy today, but you know, sometimes you need a little crazy in your life, don't you think? Like the fact that my camera just decided to fall apart. Don't know what's up with that. There we are. Hey everybody. Hope you're all doing well today. Just making sure our audio is, like, I'm not being eclipsed by the music. We're all good. But yes, it is really good to see everybody out there. Hello. I'm Omni, and I'm the creator of Legacy First Flight. My sci-fi space opera, Tales from the World of Tomorrow, and I am very happy to be here and talking with you all. And I'll be doing some art for the actual tabletop role-playing game, right here with everybody here. So, hi! It's been a bit of a flustery kind of morning, so if I seem a little off my game, I apologize. Not everything can be perfect. After all, it is a live stream, and it wouldn't be a live stream without actual complications. So, you know, here we be. Just gonna make sure that our repeat is fine. Looks like we're good. Nice. Alright. So, without further ado, let's get to it. And, oh yeah, I probably should take a moment to say thank you to my incredible patrons. Those folks over at patreon.com/thelastomnitect, you guys are amazing. You keep me basically, like, afloat. Those include my amazing patrons Ampersand and Atlas at Tier 1, Necronomus and Souls Rolls at Tier 2, and my incredible Ironclad allies at Tier 3, Mossy the Mighty and Heinrich the Heroic. You guys are incredible. Truly, all my patrons are the reason I'm able to do any of this, so thank you so much. If you want to support my channel or my works, go follow me there. Likewise also, like the video, slap subscribe. We're a tiny channel, we're still growing, and all the support we can get is appreciated. But in addition to that, if you just follow me at patreon.com, you'll get a bunch of free webcomics you can read, including the entirety of Gentry Delon Ain't No Fascist, as actually issue 44 just dropped this week. So go give it a look. In the meantime, let's get back to some work today. And my camera working would be amazing. There we are. I'm going to have to reset it on everything, aren't I? Alright. So, let's talk today about what we're going to be making and what our goal is. This right here is not what we're making. This is what we drew last week, the Operator. The second of the 6 careers that you can play as in Legacy First Flight. We're instead going to be drawing today the Jockey, which I have drawn no art of yet on this little thing. However, I feel like this is where we can sort of pop this over. Why is this like this? What is going on? Why is it so huge? I don't know why. That's very weird. That is so weird. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was expecting. It maximized for some reason. I do not know why that has a maximize feature. Anyway, so, jockeys. Jockeys are the incredible pilots who are basically the big guys in Legacy. So if anyone out there has ever wanted to be the ace Top Gun pilot after watching a fighter movie, or wanted to be a mech pilot after playing Armored Core, or Mech Warrior, or watching Pacific Rim, then jockey is the career for you. Basically, jockeys are folks that start, more or less, with... Let me just open this up because I actually have some art here for this. A little bit of art from, like, the last time I drew this. Beautiful. We can open this up now, and you guys can see. So, jockeys are the pilots in Legacy. They pilot mechs, they pilot aerospace craft. The mechs, called walkers, are highly diverse and very varied. Same thing with the aerospace craft, which are designed to be very modular. You choose a chassis, you slap what weapons you want on it and systems, and it dramatically changes the functionality of your machine. This is kind of, like, best exemplified by a large character in a tabletop role-playing game of the traditional sense. those of you who ever played Dungeons & Dragons and been like, I'd really like to play a troll, or I'd really like to play I don't know, a giant or a dragon, like not the Dragonborn, but the full-scale version, this is your chance. In Legacy, you can play as a mech or as a walker or an aerospace craft. Walkers are 2x2 in space, so they're technically a 2-inch wide base size, or a large creature as we would. And the next scale up from that would be aerospace craft, which are 3 wide, and so as a result occupy more space on the grid. These have very different functionality from each other though, so let's talk a little bit about that, shall we? Just gonna open this up over here and get a little more art for you folks so we can talk about the difference between walkers and aerospace craft. So let's open up an old doodle we've got here. This one's a pretty common doodle I often will use. Walkers. So walkers come in all sorts of varieties. They are not merely one type of machine. They are highly varied in their design and functionality. In fact, actually, I believe we have the beginnings of the final walker catalog. There are 6 classes of walker right out of the gate, and they're divided by their mobility methods. So if I'm to open the actual Legacy core rulebook, which I may be doing on a side tab over here, don't stare too closely, folks. We're just gonna pop this bad boy open and flip once the page loads. So walkers are divided into 6 classes, basically. Or I should say 6 leg types and 3 weight classes, usually. And that is, very simply, heavyweight, lightweight, medium weight. Those are the 3 weight classes. And in terms of our actual, like, chassis, we have a total of 6. So, this is to start with at the beginning of the game. There will be more in the book. There will be more for players and GMs to mess around with. After all, it's not just players that can be jockeys and pilot machines. Also, enemies and NPCs can do the same. So my rule of thumb is I want these to be balanced for both NPC and player character usage. So you can go wild with this. So, at the moment, if I zoom this in, boop, beautiful. So we can get a little bit of a better view. So we have the Vassal Walker chassis, a plantigrade walker, which is basically a humanoid mech. It's kind of a little squat, a little more Titanfall than some of the other designs, but it's kind of designed to be this pretty versatile, very advanced kind of walker with a pair of more humanoid arms. So if you ever wanted to play like the actual like Titanfall style mechs, the Vassal's a great place to start. The Nemesis is the next one. It is a civilian market model, and actually I do have a little bit of it I have like one piece of art for it. One piece of art for it at the moment, which, if I can open this up, should be on the page spread here. Here we go. This is the Nemesis. It is a digitigrade walker. So for those of you who don't know what digitigrade means that you are, I'll zoom this in a little closer so we can have that dominate the space. Digitigrade means that they have grasshopper legs, basically, or raptor legs is the better example. So those of you who are familiar with like velociraptors and stuff from Jurassic Park, where they basically walk on their toes, not on their heels. That's how this thing is. It makes them very nimble, very agile. They're very good at moving and fighting at speed. They're a little on the lighter side, but they hit like a brick too. The general rule of thumb, walkers are always pretty hardy machines. The next one is the Sojourner. This is a hexapod walker. So I'm not sure if I have any art of hexapod walkers at the moment. I think that's definitely one of the things I want to draw for sure coming up. But at the moment, I do believe I do not have any hexapods currently doodled, which is unfortunate because the hexapods are really fun. Let's see if I have like an old avatar drawing. Avatars are a particular like super advanced class of walker. Think of them as like an endgame variant. And this is a really old doodle, it's like 2021 that I doodled. But yeah, you can see hexapod. 6 legs, they kind of scuttle. This one's more of like a hexapod centaur, almost, in a sense. But like, you'll see them, they tend to be a little bit more squat and ant-like or insect-like. So they're very stable, They're not as fast as others, but they bear more weight, and they have more system flexibility. You pay for it, though. So they're slower, and they're a little more heavily armed to compensate. So that would be our Sojourner. We have the Reliac, which I have drawn because it's a fantastic mech, and I love it, and I want to make sure I drew it. The Reliac. This is a really rough doodle of it, but it'll do. So this is what's referred to as a gyro wheel walker. Gyro wheels are exactly what they sound like. It is a pair of wheels. If you're familiar with Star Wars, it is the Hailfire droid's method of moving around. Basically, two wheels strapped onto a chassis creates a hamster ball kind of effect where no matter which way you're facing, the wheels will always adjust you to face the right way. It makes them impossible to knock down, incredibly nimble, very versatile, moderately good at bearing weight, but they run into the issue of they're not very stable. At least in terms of their ability to get beat about. They can be pushed and thrown around. They don't really have nearly as much traction as something that can plant its feet in the ground and actually tense up. So there's your Reliac. Next we have, if I can open this up again, next we have Treadlegs. So Treadlegs are interesting. They are the heaviest, thickest, mightiest of mechs. We're probably going to end up turning this into a two-part video, honestly, because there's so much to draw with the jockey, and I would like to finish drawing or at least concepting out a couple of these mechs with you guys, along with a couple of aerospace designs, because I really want to get that done before we move on to the next class. So, if you guys like mechs, good news, everyone! Sorry, let's do this appropriately. Good news, Mark! We can finally be mech pilots! We can fight like mech pilots! Yeah, so we'll be doing the mechs and the aerospace craft for probably the next couple of episodes where we just flesh that art out. And then we'll return to finishing the rest of the classes. So we have the Treadleg, which basically is sort of like a tank. One on walkers, one on aerospace. That's probably what we're going to end up doing, I think. Just to sort of break it up a little bit so we can have the aerospace pilots and the walker pilots and sort of give them both equal time. Because in my experience, it tends to gravitate more towards the mechs than the aerospace craft, and I think they're both awesome. They deserve a whole episode to themselves. So, yeah. The Treadlegs are basically this heavy-set, quadrupedal, like, tread system, or in some cases, it's even bipedal, where they sort of replace the lower forelegs of the mech completely with treads. But the big trick is they are heavy tread, all rugged terrain, all super durable. They are the heaviest weight class of walker out of the gate. Even if you're a lightweight Treadleg, you will be heavier than any other lightweight. You will be approaching middleweight in terms of the amount of, like, the amount of system integrity you have, the amount of stability you have, the amount of armor you have. You will be really hard to move. However, emphasis, you will be really hard to move. Yes, Wally is a great example. So Treadlegs are not fast. They are the slowest class of walker leg. This is simply because they are not as nimble. Theoretically, they can get up to the same speeds as any other on an open highway, but most walkers aren't fighting on an open highway. Very rarely are such environments so conducive to combat. And so as a result, they are very hard to obscure from moving, but they don't usually get that kind of like full speed. So you're kind of paying for being the slowest, easiest to hit thing. The final mech we have here is the Shade. The Shade I have drawn many times because one of our players in our live stream campaign actually does in fact pilot it. So if I can open this bad boy up, get this to our first flight campaign, and get our player character assets, we will open up the Shade. So the Shade is what's referred to as a float wing chassis. This particular one is named MECH. Love you, Paul. Love that you make me say that out loud. Everyone go follow Paul Ampersand, or Ampersand Productions. Truly an amazing creator and a very fun friend, and a great friend. But god damn. He knows how to name things in a way that I can't ever say with a straight face. So, float wing mechs are designed to levitate above the ground on basically a gravatic and magnetically maintained bubble. They don't actually touch the floor. Think of them as like maglev, but they don't just float on metal. They'll float anywhere. And as a result, they're very fast. They are probably the fastest class of mech. They are certainly, at very least, the most nimble class of mech. However, what you pay for it in is being probably the most fragile of all the mechs, and also having the least stability of any of the mechs. This means weapons that you would normally be able to use on other mechs might be more unstable for you. So, stability is, as a rule of thumb, basically the ability to fire a weapon while on the move. If you have a weapon for a mech, whenever you select it, or whenever you use it, you have to look at the actual mech's stability requirement. So a stability of 2, as an example here for the 56th iteration Attune Field Gun by House Frax. So, stability works like this. You compare the mech stability to the stability requirement of the gun. If it's equal to or under your mech stability, then you're fine. Fire it as much as you like, no one cares. If it is up to twice as high as the stability of your mech, that means that your mech needs to actually stop to fire the gun safely. You can still fire it, but it needs to stabilize. It needs to sacrifice its movement to actually do so in a way that won't cause it to potentially take a test. If you do decide to fire it while on the move, a die must be rolled, and if you fail, you might damage yourself. Finally, if you have a mech that is the stability of your mech is literally less than half of what would be required for the stability requirement. So if the stability requirement is, say, as an example, your stability 1, let's say the stability requirement of the mech of the gun is actually a stability requirement of 4. Well, that means that it's over twice as much as what your mech can handle, and there's no safe way to fire the gun. So no matter what you do, if you're moving and firing, if you're firing from a standstill, your mech will struggle and possibly be damaged by the firing mechanism. You still can fire it, but just be aware, every time you do, your mech's going to be really overstressed. And this is how I kind of balanced out the system. So we have it so that at the extreme end, we have tread legs, which have a stability of 5, which is insane. And then most of the others tend to fall somewhere between stability 1 and stability 5. For the most part, like the plantigrade 1 is stability 3, pretty standard. The digitigrade 1 is stability 2, so a little on the frailer side, but manageable. The hexapod is stability 4, because it's really well grounded. And the gyro wheel is stability 2, because it's kind of a bubble, more or less. And then finally, you have stability 5 on the tread leg and stability 1 on the shade, because it's literally gliding above the ground. These are the mechs of the setting. So, today we're going to draw the actual jockey. Next time we'll start, and if we can, we'll try to start drawing mechs. Failing that, we'll at least do one episode solely on drawing mechs, and one episode solely on drawing aerospace craft. So let's get to it, shall we? So, being a jockey is actually pretty fun. For starters, you get to begin the campaign out with a pretty unique trait, actually. You start with a mech, or the ability to purchase a mech. Now, for the record, it costs a lot of money, and player characters start their careers with like a certain amount of money saved up from their prior experience. There's no way that anyone is able to start their careers having saved enough money to buy a mech outright. It's not possible. However, the system actually allows you to take debt out in order to pay for things. So if you want to be a mech pilot and start right out the gate as a mech pilot, you can. Nothing's stopping you. You just need to take a little bit of debt on. So let's choose a species to start this. I've historically drawn them as Sylph, but that's just because that's what I always do. It isn't mandatory or necessary. In fact, actually, dare I say, we can do something else. So, let's pop in and open our Choose Your Own Adventure page and decide what we're going to do here. Let me just open this up. I need to move some things around so I can actually see the screens. Cool. We good. So, I happen to have a chance cube here. We have 1 through 8. 1 is Acris, 2 Anizali, 3 is Children, 4 is Self, 5 is Humankind, 6 is the Click, 7 is Oraname, and 8 is the Shrike. Rule of thumb right now is that we will re-roll anything that is already selected. So, we already have a human character, we already have an Oraname character, and we already have an Anizali character. So let's roll this bad boy out and see what we get. This is just walking down walking down the line here. So hilariously, I got a 4. So we got a Sylph. It keeps giving me Sylph, and I'm okay with that. It's very funny that Sylph end up being jockeys so often. A Shrike jockey will be cool. We can always draw 2. So we'll draw the first one here, more of a mech pilot jockey, and then we'll draw we'll draw out ourselves like an actual aerospace jockey. So let's roll it out. I'm gonna see which one. I'm gonna do a die now, like literally flip a coin practically. On a 1 through a 4, it'll be a mech pilot. On a 5 through an 8, it'll be an aerospace craft. That's a 7. So this is something new. It's giving us an aerospace jockey. That's gonna be fun. So let's open ourselves this and get to work. Sylph are kind of fun because they have this very specific body plan. Makes them like really... They're almost ape-like in a way. They tend to like walk around on like... not on all fours, but they kind of knuckle walk a bit. So let's get to it. Let's start doing some doodles. They have these very long, like, almost... They're not quite serpentine bodies. They're very sinuous. Very cheetah-like, almost, in their proportions, which is kind of the point, really. We're going to shrink this a tad. Cool. And also, I'm going to roll a die here and just randomly determine the... I guess, presented gender here. Okay. So, in this instance, we are looking at a mask Sylph. That's interesting. So, the Sylph have a very distinctive, the proper term would be sexual, not sexual phenotype, but like they have distinctive sexual traits in terms of their physicality. I guess it's sexual dimorphism is the term, I believe, where like you have one, like, there's very specifically traits that come from one particular set of chromosomes and one particular set of the other. But again, this is sex traits, so, like, bear in mind, Sylph can be trans, they can be intersex, there's a lot of diversity in there. General rule of thumb, though, if we're going by, like, the broadest brushstrokes, Sylph males have this very long, almost axe-like head, and they have these very long plumes that come out of the tops of their heads. But they tend to be, like, very specifically almost like a spiky kind of mane. Whereas for the Sylvan females, they tend to have a much shorter, snubby, almost gecko-like kind of nose. However, their ear frills are much longer, and their tail frills are much longer as well. So, and of course, like, again, you can have intersex folks, or you can have folks that are agendered, that fall outside of that spectrum, and they can have any combination of either of those traits, or those traits in varying levels. So we're just going to go with a relatively, like, straightforward mask Sylph, because I haven't drawn many of those lately. I gotta make sure I got the right brush, because it keeps doing that. There we go. So I'm going for a very, like, a very leaned back, kind of almost like Devil May Cry style, like, posture here. So here we are. We're just gonna adjust those hips a little bit. There we go. I'm gonna have to shrink this even more. They are very long beans. Like, the average Sylph tends to stand roughly, like, up to shoulder on a human. So again, they tend to do the knuckle walking thing, and while they're knuckle walking, they tend to come up roughly about, like, anywhere from 4 and 6 inches, 4 feet 6 inches, to like 5'5" at the top of their head when they're standing like that. But if they stand on their hind legs, they tend to come up to about 5 to 6 on average. But then you have to factor in their tail, which is like half again their body length, because they're basically cheetah people that happen to be also apes, that happen to also be reptiles. They're very fun. Like, you can really go wild with designing things with the Sylph. They're very, very, like, a lovely combination of traits from different species that we have in the real world. Okay, so I'm going to take this, sculpt this down a little more. So they have these very long forearms. And we're going to do the head now. They have these very long necks, very muscular necks. They're incredibly strong necks, because they have to bear this very heavy kind of shovel-like head. And we're just playing around here with this. Just sort of running with it. And then we have the ears. They have these sort of like frills that come back over here. And then usually you have like this kind of mane that tends to run. Like that almost. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So they're basically built for running. They're really, really good. And again, as always, I'm always willing to entertain questions about the different species and their different, like, subcultures and stuff. Please feel free to ask as we do our little doodles. And we're just going to give these really strong, like, muscular hind legs. They're not nearly as long as the forelegs, their forearms. Their forearms are much stronger. These legs are largely made for, like, they're really stout, kind of durable push-off legs. So that's really more what they're built towards. And here we go. So we've got ourselves a pretty good, like, set of talons. Specifically made for pushing off the ground. Beautiful. Do you get variation that's self-dependent on the environment they grew in? Same as lizards in the desert are very different from lizards in the rainforest? A little bit. So the their world, because of how tectonically chaotic it is, their world is kind of overrun with, like, really, really energetic flora and fauna. It's very swift to adapt to chaos. And so, as a result, they tend to have far more, like, luscious kind of forest across most of it, most of where the sylph tend to live. So, as a general rule of thumb, they're not like a full-on mono-environmental species at all, but their environment is very specific, just because of the nature of their planet. So this does mean that they tend more towards shades of green and gray, but you can have any sort of variation. There are an entire subculture of sylph that actually tend to live in the ocean, others that tend to live in more mountainous terrain, and so they have, over time, slightly adapted traits to it. But the big thing is, because all sylph are constantly migrating ahead of this cataclysmic storm, they're always kind of like, they never really stay in one place long enough to fully adapt to the environment historically. So, unlike other species like lizards, which might stick around in a basin for a couple thousand years and adapt to the desert-like climb, you really don't get that with sylph. They move too much. The nature on their world necessitates they move that much. And when I say they have very long arms, I'm not kidding. If this was the kind of game where I got super granular in its design, it would be not unreasonable for me to give them natural reach. But I didn't want to do that. It felt like it'd be a very powerful trait to give to a species that is already really fast. Their big trait is that they are faster on foot than acris are in flight. So that's already a pretty powerful trait. There we go. Hell, that is fast. Yeah, they're really quick. This is, again, in part to do with their actual just physicality. Again, if there's a species on Earth they're closer to, ape is just their gait. In reality, their running gait bears a lot more in common with the cheetah. So, like, that's the kind of speeds we're talking about here. Basically so fast that they're ludicrously quick. However, while that is true, they do have, like, other traits, but they're fast. Their big thing is they're fast, and the other one is that they have a very fast reaction time. This comes from their tectonically active homeworld. They've developed this really powerful peripheral nervous system. Long and short, they can often almost preternaturally sense things. They don't actually see the future, but to a species with less reaction time, it kind of seems like they do. As a result, they basically can't be surprised. Ever. There's no way to, like, actually catch a sylph in a surprise round, unless they're unconscious. Lean forward, tail out behind for balance, the legs just moving like mad. Exactly. These things bound at great speed. The upper legs are kind of grabbing the earth and yanking them behind, and their rear legs kind of give them the push off and help keep them, like, afloat. And then their tail makes sure they're stable and can turn on a dime. They're incredibly fast. And also, if you're a scaly, it's your chance to play a scaly. There's a couple of look, I'm never gonna shame anybody in my community who do likes themselves some who's part of that community. No shame ever, never. But at the same time, I won't pretend I didn't also cater to you guys a little bit too. I threw a little. You got the Shrike, you got the Sylph. You got options. You got options. I want you to have them. Take them. Take them, please. Here we go. So, we've got ourselves a pretty good posture here. I do want to add the tail, at least, a little bit. I'm going to add the tail as a separate layer, actually. Here we go. We're going to put that below. I choose the insect very much, thank you. Yeah, it's cool. I love the insects, too. The Sylph are amazingly cool, but so are the Click. I wanted to do my best to make sure that every species had their thing that made them cool. I didn't want anyone to go like, oh, that's obviously the coolest one. I kind of hate when that happens, when you're doing, like, species design. Like, I love a lot of the designs that Blizzard does, but, like, it's very clear whoever designed the Draenei was like, yeah, and here's the one that everyone's gonna want to play. It's like, yep, nope, that's fair. They are the most interesting visually and design-wise, and, you know, you could like the Blood Elves and what have you, but they're basically just elves. Like, the Draenei show all the creativity of the team, basically. And so, like, I never was a big fan of that. That was very frustrating to me. And we're gonna get the tip of the tail here. There we go. Not as prominent in their tail feathers, and their tail spines, as, say, the more femme-presenting Sylph are. But, like, it's still pretty good. Also, technically, to make this very clear, Sylvan females are as physically, like, present as the Sylvan males are. Neither one of them has a dominion on strength or endurance. If anything, it's just simply, like, their body plan is, like, slightly divergent. And again, to make it very clear, slightly divergent is the key word here. They still, like, there is a lot of diversity in the species. You absolutely can have a Sylph that is masked and is intersex, or has gender, or has, like, the sex traits of another Sylph. So, like, nothing's saying you can't. Just going by, like, the roughest of, like, broad brushes here. After all, I want the folks who join up who want to play a trans Sylph or a trans Click or a trans Shrike to feel the same way. To be like, hey, I can be represented here. I think it's really important. For the Horde! Yes, the Horde are... yeah, pretty much the Horde. I like the Horde's designs a little bit more. The Horde are cool. The Draenei are awesome. They're not Horde, I know. They're Alliance. I think also it's because the Alliance has, like, so little... The Alliance are, like, just a bunch of humans, or human offshoots. It's gnomes, it's dwarves, it's elves, it's humans. And then later they got the Draenei, and then later they got the Lycans. What are they called? I think it's the Lycans, the werewolves. So, you know, who are basically human half the time, and the other half of the time are furry. So, no shame, again, that's not a bad thing. Being called a furry is not a bad thing. I don't think it is. Someone who was called queer a lot when they were younger. Gotta tell you, usually when folks use things like that as a slur, it's because they're the most insecure about that kind of thing. Not you. You should be fine. But yeah, the Horde has a bunch of, like, a lot more body diversity in their species. Tauren, Orc, Troll. But, yeah, the Draenei still stand head and shoulders, I think, design-wise. Okay, so we got a pretty good, like, shape going here. Let's get ourselves a little bit of work over it. We need to make sure the jockey's at full size, and we're going to reduce the opacity behind. We're going to just turn that off completely, actually. Okay. So, if we're working on a jockey, the first thing we need to do is consider that jockeys tend to use relatively light armor and gear when they're not in their mechs, or in their aerospace craft. This is an aerospace jockey, so we've got to consider the fact that they will have an atmosphere suit that they likely maintain, and also, probably that also has airbags built into it. So, this is pretty common for most, like, jockeys generally. Atmosphere is kind of the spacesuit equivalent in this setting, and everyone has access to them. So you might want to make sure you have a good set. This is going to be block. This is going to be tail block. And this is going to be detail layer. Let's start playing with some shapes. I'm thinking we're going to go with a little bit of like a, again, sort of like a flight suit style aesthetic. So that's the case then, we're going to have padded shoulders. It's going to probably come out to like almost a puffy kind of upper arm kind of thing. It's probably designed to inflate when they go into higher Gs. Same thing down here. So we're going to sort of just take this and fluff it out a little bit more. We're going to have ourselves our belt, which is sort of like this lattice web in it that's designed to hold stuff. I think for the arms, we're probably going to have just like a simple vambrace here on one arm. And that feels pretty good. I'm also going to give some gloves. I think that might be fun. We'll go with some fingerless gloves, you know? We're going to go for the full biker look here. There we are. That looks pretty decent. Pants-wise, we're going to keep it pretty straightforward. Not going for the full Yodpur situation here, but I want these things to be, like, very simple. Just get some knee pads in there. We'll give ourselves a holster on the side as well. For a sidearm. Because, again, jockeys themselves tend to depend on their mechs and their aerospace craft in order to do fighting. So, in this case, we're kind of just running on the edge of what is there. Hold on one second. Ooh. Sorry about that. I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting what I need done here. Here we go. Okay. Just wanted to see this reference again, because I actually did draw a Sylvan, like, mech pilot suit. It's a little off, though. I don't like the old design, so we're going to mess around with it a little more. But that said, you actually can see what a masked sylph looks like in that. Very long arms, long tail, big head. It's fun. Okay, so we're going to get onto that detail layer again, and let's start getting some actual shading in. we're going to start with where the light... I think where the darkness falls is probably the best bet. So we're going to put this at, we'll say 35. 35, 25 is probably better. 25. Okay. And now we're going to do the face. They have a very distinctive jawline. Very long jaw. General rule of thumb. And they have a snoot. And they have this kind of like ear-like structure that comes right behind the jaw. There we are. Now we can begin to work on the rest of the facial structure. Put this at 10. This at 10. Okay, thanks. Beautiful. Awesome. And let's work on these shoulder pads here. We're going to give ourselves a nice chest plate. I feel like having some sort of rebreathing system is probably a good idea, given that this dude is going to be flying around at actual Mach speed. Oh yeah, for the record, like when I used to play Warcraft, I was a blood elf at the time. I just really wanted... I actually didn't want to play Horde. I wanted to play Draenei, but all my friends were playing the Alliance at the time, and I was like... sorry, they were all playing Horde at the time, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll play Horde. And thank God the Blood Elves were there, because I would have been sad otherwise. And I just eventually gave up playing. I realized eventually, like, I was playing more for them than I was playing for me. So... Okay, so we're sort of getting, like, the look of what their musculature looks like a little bit. I kind of want to give this, like, a big, poofy, like, neck sort of a deal. So let's do that. See if I can manage to get that. Yeah, a nice fur-lined neck. So, for the record, they're not actually, like, amphibians. They're not really reptiles. They're technically I believe the term is a theropod, which is a species that maintains its own, like, internal heat. So it's not like they wouldn't be able to fly in an aircraft because, oh no, they get chilly and go to sleep. That's not how they're actually, like, it's not really how it works for them. And we're just going to take this, put some clips on it so it can be pulled over. There we go. We have our shoulder pads. Can't be too big because they can't get in the way when this dude moves to, like, put his arms up. Which is, you know, kind of a relevant thing here. So far, all arms, so... And then we sort of pull this in here. There we go. We get our belt. And we get our holster. We get the pants. Again, we're going to sort of fluff it up around the edges, because that's just nice to have when you're at higher altitudes. Even with atmosphere on, you still want to be, like, at least a little comfortable, a little cozy. They tend to, like, manage your own internal body temperature, but, like, let's be real. It's always nice to have a little bit more warm on, isn't it? Like, I like to wear the fuzzier clothes myself if I can. And then we're just going to go over here. Get this vambrace on. basically the same thing here. There we go. So we're looking pretty good. Let's get our gloves on. Because who doesn't love a good pair of fingerless gloves? Especially on a pilot. That just looks cool. I'll give it like a little bit of fluff there on the edges. As for the rest, feels pretty good, so I don't need to do too much to that. Just gonna make this a little more segmented. And I kind of want to have at least some sort of like attachments here that can be attached to hoses, maybe go around the arm, the inside of the arm. Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. Have one that goes sort of over the top of the arm here. There we are. And we're going to have a little bit of like a neck seal that can come up. And very clearly the dude has his helmet off. Only time fingerless gloves are better is on a rifleman. Mm-hmm. It's actually one of the coolest parts of the visual design of the Halo 4 and 5 series that I know a lot of people do not like. And I get it, but the actual artists who worked on that kicked ass. You might not like the style, but it was excellent science fiction design. The Spartans actually don't have armor on their trigger finger. It's actually the one finger they don't have armor on. Which to me makes sense. You want to have like really nimble fingers, and as it is, Spartans are already huge. So they're probably almost breaking off the actual guards on most of these guns anyway. Okay, so let's get this down to 15%. And let's get to actually doodling some shapes here. Okay, we can get under the underside of this. We can get the belts. Gonna get the underside of this shirt so that we can see it's got like a little bit of texture to it, and we'll have light coming from the front here. I think that's the best bet. Light coming from the direction he's facing. Again, I'm going to presume him because masculine gender markers, but that's again sexual traits, not necessary. You see this character inside the book and you're like, I want to use this as my art, but I don't want them to be a guy, you fucking go right on ahead. You have my official permission as the actual world builder. Do whatever the fuck you want. I want you all to have fun. I'm not gonna be offended. And in fact, if I was, fuck me. let me go a little stronger on that. If I was, fuck me, I'd be a terrible person. You have fun with your game. Let no one else tell you how to do it. There's a part of me that wants to give him a helmet. Maybe. Like, give him a little helmet. Do I get to erase this? Okay, so this is all in the detail layer already. I'm going to try a helmet. And see what I can do. I've never done a helmet on the Sylph before. So, like, let's try this out. So it had to come all the way around. And I think the best way to handle it would probably be to have it, like, slope down, actually. Deflect off the top. Kind of go with the skateboarders, like, approach. That might not be a bad idea. There we go. And if I were to take this and just fill this in, let's see how that looks. I might not be pleased with it, but I want to at least try it. I realized something. I just realized I'm just reinventing the Kig Yar helmet. I'm reinventing the Kikyar helmet. Okay, I can think of worse things. So you got a chin strap here. Comes along the back of the chin. Nice. Yeah, a half helmet's probably the better solution. Yeah, I actually kind of like that. It sort of slides off the head. Might want to, like, slightly round it off a little more. There we go. That's actually not that bad. Yeah, that's really not that bad, actually. Okay. Yeah, we can work with that. Something to call that helmet. And I'll play around with the design. We'll see if it's something I stick with. I don't need to be married to the idea. And theoretically, I could always put, like, a mask on it. And then have, like, a hose coming off that goes around the back of the head. Nah, I don't like that. It doesn't look that good. I could put it coming off the other side. Nah, it doesn't read right. We leave that off. Okay, cool. So for now, we'll stick with we'll go with the helmet as like a maybe. Put helmet question mark so I can dabble and see if I like it or not. We got ourselves a pretty good, like, bit of work done here, though, already, so that's a good start. Most Sylph tend to have, like, some fangs. Not many, but, like, enough. Okay, we're gonna put this at 25. Take that underneath. And then we sort of take this and sculpt this up. And again, it's one of those, like, they just have this very big shovel-like jaw, so you can kind of work with that. Have this ear-like projection back here. And they have this really strong neck. Let's start adding some lighter detail. So for now, I'm liking where this is going. We're just gonna finish the shading here. Now, fun fact, a couple hundred years in the future, some things haven't really changed that much. Turns out fixing your pants, pretty straightforward. Zippers, Velcro, that stuff's still pretty relevant in the distant future. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes it's just fine as it is. And I'll add a little bit of like a display panel here, a little shockproof display panel. We'll do the same thing on the other side. There we go. Not bad so far, not bad. Kind of think like segmenting that out is a good idea too. Okay, cool. So now we can start adding some light to this as well. I'm gonna just quickly, I should do the spines as well because the spines are very distinctive. They are a little flexible for the record. They are kind of like the keratin in our fingernails, so they actually can be flexed with water. And unlike our fingernails, they're not a giant bundle of nerves waiting to scream at the slightest movement, so they do sort of like mess around with their tendrils a little bit. It's actually a pretty common trait in Legacy. The Sylph have these, the Anazali have these. The Anazali's a lot softer to begin with. It's more like a skin tags, kind of, that their hair is. But they do sort of quill up a little bit if they're left to, like, dehydrate too long. the Shrike actually have these quills almost identically. It's kind of a convergent evolutionary thing across the galaxy. Also, a way for me to explain how I like to draw quills on my reptile creatures. You know, I'll be real. I can own a little bit of that. I just think they're neat, folks. I just think they're neat. And I really want to see more of them. So I do. I'm the artist, so what I say happens. Unless you're an artist, in which case you can say what happens. On your own time. I'm mostly joking. But it is true. I just really like the design. So I stick with it. And a couple of nozzles on here. I want this because it's a flight suit to be very kind of practical in its design. It isn't going to be pretty. It's going to be very, like, straightforward to form factor, like this does this. It isn't going to be perfectly balanced on both sides. There we are. That feels actually pretty good. I really like that so far. We got to do the tail, though. We got to do the rest of the details here. And then we can sort of get under here. There we are. Get around that. Let's get the fingers. Fingers are very strong and pronounced on Sylph. Very big claws. Fun fact is actually the hardiest part of a Sylph's hand is actually the knuckles. They knuckle walk, so like their knuckles are very durable. Sylph don't claw at people. They punch you. And when they punch you, it's gonna hurt. The only reason they have these long fingers is because it actually helps them sort of grip and climb, but like they tend to sprint on all knuckles, so as a result, you got them knuckles. Knuckles to make Knuckles blush. And then we can sort of grab these, add that on. Beautiful. And we do the same thing with this tail. I feel should probably go behind the legs here. Yeah, we'll go behind the legs. Oof, pardon. That was a hiss. I'm gonna have a little bit more of my smoothie. Always make sure you're drinking, folks. This is your reminder. If you've been watching this, so far, we have been live for quite a bit, so please, do me a huge favor and drink something. Please. It's been 60 minutes since we started. And also, while you're watching right now, if you're there, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. It helps me. It really does. Ah, delicious. Alright, so we're going to save this while we're going, because I don't want to lose my progress. I'll be very angry if I do. Okay. So let's get a little bit more detail up on this biz. Because I want some more details. Let's get ourselves a light layer going. This is going to be shadow layer or shade layer. We're going to call this light layer. And we're going to start getting some of that going here. gonna sort of do the same thing here. Beautiful. Alright, cool. And get that. We're gonna merge this down because I, like a doofus, did all that work on the shade, on the light layer. Now we're gonna make a light layer. Okay. And on the shade layer, I'm gonna finish the tail. ADHD, folks. It is a thing. Let no one say otherwise. It is absolutely a thing. I'd say it's a hell of a drug, but no one's getting on this intentionally. There we go. Okay, not bad. So you got ourselves a pretty good Sylvan Pilot look, which I kind of dig. Let's get into that lighter zone here. Swap this out for a nice shade of white, and get to it. First off, we're going to outline the little details that are going to be a little more obvious where the light catches things. Top of the brow as an example. A little bit around the lip here. Get the teeth a little more. Top of this. So it's looking alright so far. I want to get the eyes a little more. Sylvan eyes are actually one of the most human eyes in the galaxy, by comparison to most other species. Most other species tend to have darker sclera in some capacity, shape, or form. But the Sylph are one of the few ones that actually have a sclera that's actually pale and light, which is fun. In fairness, this is because, unlike a lot of other species, the Sylph didn't have, like, literally hundreds of years hanging out with the Anazali to go, wow, those eyes look cool, I want those, and make their own versions. So, yeah, they're a little bit less of that. I'll make this a little lighter. 10%, I think. There we go. That feels pretty good. Yeah, I kind of like that. That's actually kind of nice. And now we can begin sort of working on the fluffy part of this jacket. We're going to down this up really hard. So we do that by drawing, like, the big lines all across, but then we sort of do little dashes towards the top. And it gives this almost cottony kind of feel to it, where light hits the top of it a little more. And as long as you stick with the same, like, texture, it actually looks pretty decent. We can go over this again with a darker shade as we need to. Yeah, that gives us a nice cottony kind of look, which is not too bad. I didn't change brushes or anything for that. It just sort of naturally works out that way. We're going to do the same thing here. Just draw the whole thing on a really light opacity. I'm currently doing this on a 10% brush, so I need to go over it 10 times in order to get a complete splash of white, which is fine by me. I don't need a complete splash of white. And where things are darker, I don't go over it as much. So I just let the darkness absorb what it needs to in that area. So yeah, this looks pretty decent so far. We got that nice puffy white texture going where it would be on the pants. And then we just sort of fill that in over the top of it. And where the light hits brightest is where we hit the most. Okay, I like that. It's got this almost like Arctic survival vibe to it, which is kind of what I want. So that works pretty well. Let's get for the rest of the arms. We're going to start like highlighting muscle groups and such. There's not too much to do with that, but just a little bit, you know. And while they do have scales, they're not very, like, big, but I like to overemphasize them when I'm drawing the self, just to make it clear they're a little scaly. It helps. Especially when you're doing, like, black and white, this kind of, like, slight iridescence is actually kind of helpful. You can get the ankle joint there. Now for the tops of the toes, where things will be the brightest. And again, you can see what I was talking about before, where their toes aren't super pronounced. So, in terms of, like, the gameplay loop for these guys, they basically are the biggest guy. In other, like, games, you have, like, a paladin or, like, a fighter with, like, the highest equivalent of, like, an AC or something. And I see that we have damage here. I don't know how the fuck that happened, but we can fix it. We're gonna go to our block. Add 100. Wham. Fix that right there. Go to our shade layer. Grab this. We're just gonna pull that down. We're all good. Fixed. Bam. Look at that. Visual errors be damned. I will not be denied my prize. Okay, we can go back to here. Alright, let's get back to our light layer here. I feel like this is where we sort of like start doing the harsher edge highlights, because these parts are metallic. They're either metallic or plastic, and both of them have one thing in common. It's not natural. So light reflects very intensely off of these. Oh, it's the wrong thing. Brush. There we go. What the hell's going on with this? That explains it. We're going to go to 45. There we go. Now again, this is a plastic, so we're going to just sort of stick with a plasticky kind of sheen to it. And we're going to just do the same thing here. And now we're going to go over this with one pass. And we're going to see how that looks. Doing like a lighter plastic is always a bit of a pain in the ass, because you never know if it's going to look decent. Looks okay. Looks fine. We're going to do the same thing here. And we'll do the same thing on the underside, just to make it clear it's the same material. There we are. Do the same thing here. And we're just going to pull this down. Beautiful. And we're going to do this at like a 35, or I think 25 is probably good enough. It'll still denote that it's that plastic, but it won't be as strong because the lighting on that side isn't as bright. It's really the characters, I guess, the left of the picture that we're looking at. So for you guys at home, it would be the left-hand side that we're going to be like doing most of the lighting from. So in this instance, it's just a weird case of, hey, this is how the light falls, and it's not quite what you'd expect, sort of a deal. Lighting is one of the toughest things to pull off as an artist. I highly recommend if you want to get good at being an artist, you need to conquer light. If you can conquer light, everything else will follow. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. Okay. And then we can get this to like a, say 25, and just start building up. We're going to get even lower. Get this to a 10% so I can get some proper increments. Where it's brightest is where it's facing the lights. We're going to get in there again and darken it in some places, but this is a good place to start. We're just going to hit this as an eraser and put this at 25, 10%. And we can sort of dumb this down a little bit as we need. Is this erasing at all? Should be. Okay, yeah, I guess it's on this, the shade layer that it's that bright. So we're going to put that at 15%. We're just going to migrate it up a little higher. There we go. So that looks okay. We're going to do the same thing on the other side here. And we're going to do the same thing on this side, because light tends to fall to catch the cracks of something. And if there's like these little modules that are inserted in, it would catch the edge around them, but not the actual thing. Put this down to 25%, 10% again, and just slightly capture a little more of that light. Not bad. Not bad at all. I kind of want to do a 45% here. We're going to catch the top of this nozzle. And then we're just going to go in at 25%. And we're just going to do this hose. And it's so easy to just get the texture and just do it that way. One pass and then a smaller pass on top to get some shading going on it. On the outside of the nodule, we do the same thing here. And then we get that same brush effect going. This is going to be a little different, though, because it's going into the darkness, so we're not going to do that much. We're just going to do, like, a little bit of an edge to denote, like, hey, there's a little light there where it gets caught. Nice. Okay, so we've already got our flight suit looking pretty decent, actually. Could be way worse. Also, how's my angle in the webcam? I feel like I'm just, like, always hunched down. Always kind of craning my neck. I'm basically doing the Sylvan neck thing, and I'm not even a sylph. For the sylph, it's healthy. For me, it's just getting frunkled, honestly. Okay, we're going to just put these here. And I'm just going to give the impression of a buckle here. Put that at 45, and we're just going to strap that going back. And do the same thing going the other way. And this is the easiest way to do belt buckles and, like, sort of paracord looking stuff. Just do the hex, and the mind fills it in pretty much immediately. And feeling that, I can go back in. And I know this is the light layer, but I'm adding a little dark in where it's relevant. Beautiful. Nice. Okay. So we got the buckles. That looks pretty good. Nice. That's looking pretty decent, actually. Dare I say. Everything through light touches. It is everything through light touches. Everything with my drawing style is sketchy. And that means I try not to be too heavy-handed. It's just the nature of the beast. I'll let you know if I ever go absolutely ham on this pad. If I ever do, it'll be a thing to witness. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. It's all light touch. I'm also gonna give myself the last sip of this because I almost knocked it over. Here we go. I'm gonna put this at 15. Slightly lighten it up a little bit because it is that same plastic as the shoulder pads. Put that at like a 5. I love that you never actually draw an object you block and around and morph it in with shadow. Yeah. I tend to play with light a lot. I'm not quite a pointillist. Like, I'm not as intense, but I am... I guess my art is more impressionistic and loose than a lot of other people's art is. And I think that's to the betterment of it. I think it actually makes it look pretty good. Because I can do with light what other people have to do with lines, and that can be tough to do. But with this, nah, I can get a texture pretty much just by doing it the old-fashioned way. Okay, let's get to 10 on this. And we're just going to sort of get the edges of the jacket here. Nice. Cool. So that's already looking pretty decent. And I'm just going to sort of put this around here. It gets a very leathery look to it very quick, which is exactly what I want. We're going to do... Okay, now we're going to do something crazy. Makes sense with your graphite uses before. Yeah, I'm a sketch artist. I mean, it's where you start, right? I'm going to do something really heavy-handed here. We're going all the way to 75% opacity with white because I'm dealing with a pure metallic here. And that's the gun. Guns and metal tend to reflect light very intensely. Now, a lot of guns often will have, like, a type of, like... You can apply shoe polish and stuff to them to help dull the sheen. But I'm not going to lie, I think it makes them look very good when they're bright and shiny and effective. If you're in a combat situation, you don't care what looks good. But as an artist, I care what looks good. I'm not quite Hugo Voss levels of disregard practicality here, but, like, I'm in that ballpark. So yeah, but here we're going to go with just that light touch again. So we're back to it. You know, we were in heavy metal for a little bit, and now we're back to that simple, lighter design. Simple plastic holster here. Really more of a shock-proof holster to make sure that, you know, this guy crashes. At least he's not going to have to worry about his gun going off or breaking. Which is a real consideration, I think, that a lot of folks who want to play jockeys should be aware of. It is very possible that you might get killed by your own mech. So, the way that walkers work in Legacy, they have this very, like, distinctive damage chart. And as they take damage, systems begin to shut down. But they also have the ability to sink heat, and they have to manage it pretty decently. And if they don't manage their heat, they can actually blow up. Like literally just blow up. It's very rare, but basically when a reactor... Either you can get shot in the reactor and instantly get destroyed. Very rare. Takes a very insane called shot. It's not common. It's not like Battletech where I just roll a die and oops, it hit me in the cockpit, I explode. It's like, this has to be something that is clearly broadcast by the GM before you get exploded. Because most mechs are designed specifically so you can't just blow up the reactor. It's the most armored part of the mech. Likewise also, their radiator. If either of those have faults, it can lead to catastrophic damage. And you don't want catastrophic damage. General rule of thumb, catastrophic is not the thing you want. Unless you're doing it to something that needs to be destroyed. In which case, catastrophic is exactly what you want. Go talk to your fellow hacker in the party. Go talk to the operative or the researcher about how to blow somebody up while just sort of looking at them. They'll help you with that. But generally speaking, for jockeys, overheat is the nightmare. It is the thing they don't want to deal with. Especially since there are actual, like, devices designed to blow up a mech. Straight up, just instantly detonate it if it reaches a certain amount of heat. A very easy way to crowd control someone in what is effectively a weaponized forklift. Okay, so you've got those... Ooh, I love those belt buckles. That belt buckle looked good. I dig it. I'm going to go in there and we're going to add a little bit of darkness into it. And in doing that, we're giving the belt buckle a little functionality. And we can see exactly where it's sort of designed to unclip. And we can choose where the light hits it. And you can see what I mean by, like, the metallic is really the hard edge highlight. This is kind of how I do non-metallic metals whenever I'm, like, drawing. It's just like, okay, it will have the brightest light on the edge. And it works. It works really well. I keep looking over here when you guys are over here. Sorry about that. One day I'll get used to it. I need to have, like, a little sticky note going, like, look this way. Look up here. Look right here. Here we go. Okay, so we've got all that. Let's get our pants done. We go down to 25, and now I'm going to do the thing I don't often do, which is crosshatch. It's a great way to get the sensation of cloth without doing any of the work involved in actually making cloth. I'd say it's a cheat, but it's not really a cheat. It's just like everyone kind of knows it. And I might not even like it. I might just feel it out again and just, like, vibe it the way I've been doing before. Seems to be going okay. It's alright. Let's put this at like 10% and let's begin to sort of fluff this out a little bit. And I'm going to just get on there. We're going to pick out where the pockets are. Same thing with the zipper and the groin. As Knuckles said, the most important area to target is the groin. Go watch Sonic 2 if you haven't. Sonic is a fantastic movie franchise. I'm not sponsored. Just think they're cool. Just think it's neat. You know, as you do. But yeah, so it's very possible to be killed by your mech. Not just by the mech exploding, though, which is important to know. There's other ways to die in a mech. Probably one of the most common is impact trauma. Your mech might be designed to take a hit, but you might not be. And so, as a result, wearing a set of atmosphere that has built-in airbags is kind of mandatory. It's what keeps you from, well, turning into paste when your mech hits something or gets hit. Anybody who has seen Gundam Unicorn and sees the one scene where Banagher's mech gets punched in the gut and he instantly vomits and passes out, that is a very common thing to happen for jockeys who get into fist fights with other mechs. You just hit someone so hard the energy transfers into the cockpit. So wearing a suit that actually can absorb that impact is really beneficial to you. Basically, anytime your mech falls down or gets thrown, that's the test you gotta really worry about. Your mech will probably be fine. You might pass out from the impact. Sonic. I like Sonic. I like the Sonics. I actually, when I was a kid, used to read the Archie Sonic comics a lot. They were my, the one comic I would read. I would not read very much of Marvel or DC. I'm not gonna lie, I really couldn't be bothered. It's good reading, but, it just wasn't for me. But the Sonic comics written by Archie Comics, though, that on the other hand that slapped. And I do hear that the IDW comics are great, but what a surprise, it's IDW and they do really good comic work. I say this as a fan of their Transformers run. So, yeah. Well worth a read. I would say it's well worth a read anyway. We're going to get the metallics there for the Knuckles. Because again, for the Sylph, that's really important. Okay, looking good. Look at that. Ain't that nifty? Also, I guess I just like celebrating any time that, anytime Hollywood adapts something in a way that actually kicks ass. I kind of love it. And I'm not gonna lie, so far the Sonic movies have been on point with everything they've tried to do. Keanu Reeves as Shadow the Hedgehog is hilarious, and Idris Elba as Knuckles the Echidna is actually amazing, and I'm all about it. I love it. Good stuff. Makes me pleased. Okay, so let's get in here and do these claws now. We need to go over here, do the same thing. There we go. And just like that, we got ourselves a pretty good Sif pilot. But I need a little more detail. We're just going to push it just a hair forward. Just a smidgen in the right direction. And that's going to be up here. Again, we got ourselves a metallic metal. So we're going to push that metal to the limit. There we go. It's amazing what you can accomplish with a little bit of lighting. Beautiful stuff. Okay, we have one little set of details left to do that I do want to make sure I get. So, let's get this 75%. You gotta get snoot correct. Snoot is done. Put this at 25. Get the bottom lip a little more denoted out. And let's get the eye. Push it a quill further. We're going to get this in the eye. So Sylvan eyes have like a very distinctive look to them. You can actually see it pretty clearly on this femme presenting Sylph. You can actually see they have this sort of like almost half goat eye kind of a deal going. Now they're not prey. Sylph are actually omnivorous. But specifically in this case, it's actually a useful trait to have when the world you're on may or may not spontaneously explode. So it helps perceive things from side angles better. There we go. We're going to put this at 25%. Because rule of thumb, you actually do have, like, shading on your eyes. And then we're just gonna put the brightest light here, obscuring the iris, and the other light down here on the other side. Just like that, we've got a little bit of light shading on the eye. Good stuff. What do Sylph eyes see? Bullshit incoming. Basically, what do your Sylph eyes see? They're really, like, they have a really interesting sense of sight. So their sense of sight is very similar to ours. It is movement-based. It is built around, like, perceiving intensity of color. But also, Sylph have the ability to, like, really hone in on little differences. Again, useful for a species where their planet may or may not decide to not be a planet under them at any point, and decide to be a sinkhole or something equally horrific. But Sylvan eyesight is excellent. It's actually one of the things that they have as a trait. They have incredibly acute senses. In a way, the Shrike, the Sylph, and the Click all kind of have that in common. They have very acute vision, and as a result, all have bonuses to their awareness. But for the Sylph, it's not just their eyes, it's everything. Their quills can sense minor changes in magnetic fields. They can also sense and feel vibration. They actually do have ears underneath those flaps that they hear with, but for the most part, their quills actually denote to them if there's anything relevant to listen to. So, yeah, they're fun. Kind of like the whiskers on a cat in a way. There we go. I'm going to add a little bit of extra detail on here, 35. I like to segment out the quills that the sylph have a little more. Some of them get really feather-like, but general rule of thumb, I kind of like to make them a little bit more like textured, kind of like pheasant feathers almost. In a way, the sylph are kind of my way to pay tribute to Quetzalcoatl and the feathered serpents of history and myth. Like, it's that sort of, like, aesthetic. I may not be Mesoamerican. However, my family's from Puerto Rico, and like respects like, so... want to show a little bit of love there. Then we can sort of like just get the tops of where the feathers sort of lodge in. And we sort of do the same thing here. There we go. We have ourselves a Sylvan pilot. The jockey. We gotta do one last thing, though, if we want to do this right. Which is, at the very back, we're gonna splash this with... let's make ourselves a shape in the background. I kind of want a cockpit, and that might be fun to do, so we'll do that. We're just going to fill that in. Let's block it out. There we go. We can add a little texture onto this. Feels pretty decent. And then let's add some little, like, fun details onto this thing. We're going to add a little bit of, like, some venting on the sides here. After all, this is a Sylvan aerospace jockey. Now, to make it very clear to all the folks out there who are watching, they're like, wait, can I only be one? No, you can be both, actually. Sylvan jockeys are multi-role, as a rule of thumb. It's kind of expected that once you learn how to pilot one heavy machine on the frontier, you kind of learn how to pilot all of them. So it's very common for a sylph to have a walker license and, or I should say not a sylph, but like any sort of like, any kind of jockey, to have both licenses at the ready whenever they need them. Yeah, we'll do that. I'll leave it a little bit, like, darker there. I'm just going to sort of pick that out so it's a little more visible against the background. Looks good. Cool. And then we can go in here and build that cockpit. Doesn't have to be much. Just a couple of buttons and dials, and that tends to go pretty far. Nice. Not bad. And we'll just hit this bad boy with a big splash of black behind him. Save it. And then... kind of feel like we need to hit it with like that beige. There we go. A little bit of gray. Let's make it a hair lighter, eh? Just a hair lighter so it stands out a little more. Put this at like... we'll go with 10%. And I'll just darken it a little more towards the bottom there. There we go. And just like that, we have ourselves a Sylvan pilot. Not too bad for about, what? Hour? 2 hours? We're about an hour and 40 minutes. That's not too bad. Feels good, folks. It feels good to get these things painted and drawn. They need to be. In order for us to get this game done, I need to actually have, like, the art complete. And that means sitting down and drawing. And with all of you guys, it's significantly more fun. So, I really appreciate all of you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you have a wonderful day. And, hey, tune in next week where we'll be drawing walkers for our jockeys to pilot. And having a good time with it. So until then, take care, Voyagers. Have a good one. Thank you, as always, to my amazing patrons, Ampersand, Atlas, Necronomus and Souls Rolls, and Mossy the Mighty and Heinrich the Heroic, and to anyone else who does decide that they're going to go and sign on to patreon.com/thelastdomdetect and either follow me for free and get a bunch of cool free stuff, or pledge and get yourself called out. And to everyone else, thank you so much. Don't forget, like, subscribe. We're a small channel. We're still growing. And I will see you out there, Voyagers. Peace.